Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up.
We're going to Congress!
In celebrations as a historic number of women are elected to the US Congress, including many of colour. Also, I'll be talking to Manon Garcia, a French philosopher, about why the idea of submitting to your man still resonates here in France. And how a Rohingya teenage girl has taken it upon herself to document the tales of suffering her community has faced in Myanmar. But we begin in the United States, where a record number of women, predominantly Democrats, have claimed victory in the country's midterm elections. This as the Me Too movement and Trump administration policies continue to alter America's political landscape. We take a look on what's set to become the most diverse group of women ever to enter Congress.
She's the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. At 29, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will represent New York's 14th district. Born to a Puerto Rican mother and an American father, she ran on a platform including dissolving the US Agency for Immigration and Customs Enforcement and universal health care.
What we are standing up for is what is right. That's right. And we will never be ashamed for fighting for what is right.
Over 120 women saw election in the midterms, most to the Chamber of Representatives, around a dozen to the Senate, and the rest to governor positions. Many of them come from religious and ethnic minority backgrounds, including Ilan Omar, once a Somali refugee.
The first woman of color to represent our state in Congress. The first women to wear a hijab to represent us in Congress.
3 Native American women are also taking up the mantle of public service in Congress for the first time, including Deb Haaland in New Mexico and Sharice Davids in Kansas. The latter, a martial arts fan and lawyer, is also openly gay.
The time for people to not be heard and not be seen and not be listened to or represented well changes now.
Possible changes too for the Democrat Party as a whole, with most of the new representatives on the party's hard left.
The gains that we've seen tonight will have an impact on policy outcomes and the direction of, I think, the Democratic Party as it moves forward and approaches 2020 and the presidential election cycle.
On the other side of the aisle, the Republicans too have their share of women, though in lesser numbers. In particular, Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee. Politically close to Donald Trump, she's the state's first female senator, with Kristi Noem also becoming South Dakota's first ever female governor.
Now, in the Me Too era, it seems all interactions between women and men are coming under close scrutiny. As an Australian living in France, I'm always fascinated by the cultural differences that separate French culture from other parts of the world. Manon Garcia, a French philosopher, has just written her first book about the notion of submission among women in France and joins me now in the studio. Manon, thanks for coming in. Your book is entitled Women Are Not Born Submissive, They Become Submissive, and it explores the rather contentious idea that women actively consent to submission, including very independent women. So let me ask you, why would any woman, especially somebody who's independent, choose to be submissive to a man?
Because we live in a society that has social norms, and social norms are such that they are normative, so they tell us how to behave. And what we call femininity is actually a norm of submission. Being feminine is to starve yourself, to be slim, to always try to be very beautiful, to take care of your husband, to take care of your kids, to always put others' interest before your own interest. And so these are norms of submission. These are norms that actually enable male domination to perpetuate.
Would you say, as a French woman currently living in the US, that this idea of a woman being submissive in order to perpetuate a certain notion of seduction is in fact very much French?
No, I actually think my book is about submission in North America and Western Europe. So I really think that it takes different forms between France and the US, but women are asked to be submissive both in France and in the US. But it's true that, I agree with you that there are norms of seduction in France that make submission a bit different, because you have to, there's this idea of a good relationship between men and women based on courtship and on a very old school notion of courtship that is very different from what happens in the US.
Yes,
sure.
It is a very different dynamic in America, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that in France, there's this idea that you need to be like everywhere, at work, in the street, in bars, there's always seduction. And I feel like in the US, in the professional realm, it's way less sexualized and eroticized than it is in France, for sure.
The Me Too movement, what impact has that had on your work?
So it was interesting for me because this submission was the topic of my PhD. So I've been working on it for a very long time, female submission in particular. But it's true that with the Me Too movement, it showed how, especially with the Tribune, the op-ed of Catherine Deneuve, how in France there was a very strong anti-Me Too movement consisting in saying, we want to be submissive, we want to be sexual objects for men, and we want to be courted and we want to be grabbed in public transportation, which is a sort of strange idea, especially from an American perspective. But so it's true that the Me Too movement showed the very strong difference between France and all the other Western countries about these issues, for sure.
One thing that you say is that the dynamic between men and women is no means a natural one, that it all comes down to education and how we socialise little girls and little boys. So how do we change that dynamic?
It's actually, I think, very hard because it happens at so many different levels. But it's true that with having non-gendered toys, non-gendered behaviors, stopping to tell girls that they're very pretty and to tell boys that they have to be very brave, we can slightly changing these norms, but eventually it has to be a big social change that we don't think women should be feminine by being submissive.
At the end of the day, when we do talk about submission, it is all about power and who has the power in the dynamic. And when you look at society, it's still seen that the men have power. But, you know, we are also starting to see more women than ever enter the workforce, more women than ever enter university, and more women than ever having their own financial means, which as a result is changing that power dynamic. So is it a case, do you think, that submission eventually, or the notion of submission rather, is going to die out?
I'm not sure, because there's a study of the University of Chicago that shows that when women start earning more than their husband, they start doing way more chores to reassure their husband that even if they're making more, they're still a good woman that is taking care of their household. So I think that it's not enough to have an economic change and a power change. What has to change is our representation of what a good woman is, or a good human being is. And if Hillary Clinton had less time to spend getting makeup on and getting her hair done, maybe she would have been better. We never know. But maybe, so I think we have to change the social norms, but having power will not be enough for that.
Manon Garcia, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, here's a tale of inspiration. Against all odds, a teenage girl who was born and raised in a refugee camp hopes to become the most educated Rohingya woman in the world. Now, the 19-year-old has taken it upon herself to document first-person accounts of people who fled Myanmar last year. This after the military and others began massacring the Muslim Rohingya communities and destroyed their homes. Yenna Lee reports.
She's lived all her life in this camp. As one of now nearly 1 million Rohingyas in Bangladesh, access to education has been a struggle. Just 1/4 of refugee children are enrolled in education centres that only teach up to grade 5 level. But 19-year-old Rahima Akhtar is determined to make her schooling a priority.
By taking education, I'm able to know myself. That's why I'm still unmarried. If we take education, then we'll be able to lead our life as a life.
Despite the obstacles, Akhtar is now a high school graduate. the teenager's biggest ally, her mother, who has stood by her side even when local elders and actor's father objected.
When the so-called respectable people of our community said that to me, I replied, let Allah punish me then. Our lives as refugees have passed in vain because of our illiteracy. If I can help my children get a better future through education, then that is what I'm going to do.
Actor has been documenting the horrors that led to the mass exodus of Rohingyas last year. The Muslim minority has been persecuted in Buddhist-majority Myanmar since independence. Denied citizenship for decades, they've been fleeing the country in waves. The United Nations has labelled the most recent crackdown as ethnic cleansing. Actor wants to study human rights to help people in similar situations as herself.
Why people are like this in this condition without any reason? Why people have to lead their life in such situation? That's why I'm very interested to learn education about human rights, and one day maybe I'll able to raise up my voice about human rights for the Rohingya.
If she's made it this far against all odds, she hopes to inspire others, starting with her own sisters.
Possessive হিসেবে
And that's it for now. We're also thrilled to announce that both myself and Virginie Hertz, the host of Actuel, our French sister program, have been awarded the gold medal for the Ricardo Ortega Prize for Broadcast Journalism for our special on UN female peacekeepers. The prize was given by the UN Correspondents Association and the show aired earlier this year. And of course, a reminder, as always, that you can connect with us via our Facebook page, that being, of course, France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.